Today's story is about a millionaire woman whose car broke down in the middle of nowhere and the poor farmer who helped her without, asking for anything in return. But what she discovered when she stepped inside his humble home shocked her in a way she never expected. Stay with this story until the end, because the twist will warm your heart and remind you that true wealth is not measured in money, but in kindness. And before we begin, if you enjoy emotional stories that restore your faith in humanity, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel, Soul of Kindness, where every story carries a powerful message about compassion and humanity. It was a quiet autumn evening when the sky over the countryside slowly turned shades of orange and purple as the sun dipped behind endless fields of golden crops. A long, narrow road stretched through the farmland with very few houses scattered miles apart. On that road drove a sleek black luxury car, worth more than most homes in the nearby villages. Inside sat Amelia Hartley, a successful entrepreneur who had built a massive business empire in the city. Amelia was known for her intelligence, ambition, and determination. By the age of 35, she had become one of the wealthiest women in the region, owning multiple companies, luxury apartments, and expensive cars. Her life was usually filled with meetings, business deals, and charity events attended by powerful and influential people. Yet, despite all the success, Amelia rarely had time to slow down and simply enjoy life. That evening, she had been returning from an important land investment meeting held in a nearby town. The countryside property had caught her interest because she was planning to expand her company's agricultural investments. Her driver had taken the day off, so Amelia decided to drive herself, something she rarely did anymore. At first, the drive felt peaceful. The quiet fields and open sky offered a refreshing break from the constant noise of the city. Amelia even rolled down the window slightly to feel the cool breeze brush across her face. For the first time in days, she felt calm, but that peaceful moment didn't last long. Suddenly, the car made a strange, sputtering sound. Amelia frowned and glanced at the dashboard. The engine warning light blinked. "That's strange," she murmured to herself. She gently pressed the accelerator, but the car began to slow down. Within seconds, the engine coughed loudly and then completely shut off. The car rolled to a stop on the side of the empty road. Amelia tried to restart it. The engine turned once, twice, then failed again. "Oh no," she whispered, frustration creeping into her voice. She grabbed her phone and checked the signal. Nothing. Not even a single bar. The road was silent, and there were no other vehicles in sight. For the first time in years, Amelia felt completely stranded. She stepped out of the car, her expensive heels touching the dusty ground of the rural road. The evening air had grown colder, and the wind carried the faint scent of soil and crops from the surrounding fields. Amelia looked around, scanning the horizon for any sign of help. At first, there was nothing but farmland stretching endlessly in every direction. Then, far across a dirt path between the fields, she noticed a small farmhouse. A soft yellow light glowed through one of its windows. It was the only sign of life for miles. Amelia hesitated. She wasn't used to asking strangers for help, especially in unfamiliar places, but she had no other choice. Carefully lifting the better into the bottom of her coat to avoid the mud, she began walking toward the farmhouse along the narrow path, cutting through the fields. Each step felt strange, as if she had stepped into a completely different world, far away from the polished offices and glass skyscrapers of the city. Meanwhile, inside the small farmhouse, a man named Daniel Carter sat at a wooden table with his 8-year-old daughter, Lily. The house was simple and modest. The walls were plain, the furniture old, but clean, and a small lantern illuminated the room with a warm golden glow. A pot of homemade vegetable soup sat on the table, filling the air with a comforting aroma. Daniel had spent the entire day working in the fields, harvesting what little crops remained after a difficult season. Farming had become harder every year due to unpredictable weather and rising expenses. But Daniel refused to give up the land that had belonged to his family for generations. Since the death of his wife 3 years earlier, Daniel had raised Lily on his own, doing everything possible to give her a loving home, despite their financial struggles. Lily laughed softly while telling her father a story from school. her cheerful voice bringing life to the quiet house. Daniel smiled as he listened, grateful for the small moments of happiness that brightened their simple life. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. Daniel looked up, surprised. Visitors rarely came this far out into the countryside. Curious, he stood up and walked toward the door. When he opened it, he was startled to see a well-dressed woman standing on the porch, her coat slightly dusty from the walk across the fields. Amelia looked both relieved and embarrassed. "I'm so sorry to bother you," she said politely. "My car broke down on the road and I was hoping you might be able to help me." Daniel immediately smiled warmly, his kind expression instantly easing the tension in the air. "Of course," he replied without hesitation. "No one should be stranded out here, especially at night. Please come inside. It's getting cold." Amelia hesitated for a moment as she looked into the modest home behind him. The house was far simpler than anything she was used to. Yet something about the warmth in Daniel's voice and the gentle light inside the house made her feel unexpectedly safe. She stepped inside, unaware that this simple decision, walking into a poor farmer's home on a lonely countryside evening, would soon lead to a discovery that would change her life forever. As Amelia stepped inside the farmhouse, she immediately felt a warmth that surprised her. The house was small and simple, yet everything was neat, clean, and filled with a quiet sense of comfort. The wooden floor creaked softly under her heels, and the gentle glow of a lantern hanging above the table filled the room with a golden light. It was nothing like the polished marble floors and modern lighting in Amelia's luxurious penthouse apartment, yet somehow it felt more peaceful. At the table sat a young girl with bright eyes and a curious smile. She looked about 8 years old and was finishing a bowl of soup while watching the stranger who had just entered their home. Daniel closed the door behind Amelia and spoke kindly. "Please have a seat. You must be tired from the walk." Amelia nodded gratefully and sat down at the wooden table. The chair was simple, slightly worn from years of use, but it felt comfortable. The little girl smiled shyly and waved. "Hello," she said softly. Amelia smiled back. "Hello there." Daniel gestured toward the bowl of soup on the table. "Would you like some?" "It's just vegetable soup, but it's warm." Amelia hesitated for a second, but the smell was comforting and inviting. "Thank you," she replied politely. Daniel poured some soup into a bowl and placed it in front of her before grabbing a small toolbox from the corner of the room. "I'll go take a look at your car," he said. "It might be something simple." Amelia watched as he stepped outside into the fading evening light. She looked down at the bowl and slowly took a spoonful of the soup. To her surprise, it tasted wonderful, simple, homemade, and full of flavor. The young girl leaned forward curiously. "Are you from the city?" she asked. Amelia nodded. "Yes, I live there." "Wow," the girl said with wide eyes. "I've only been to the city once." Amelia smiled warmly. "What's your name, Lily?" she replied happily. "And that's my daddy. He can fix almost anything." Amelia chuckled softly. "That's good to know." As Amelia continued eating, she noticed drawings taped to the refrigerator. Colorful crayon pictures of houses, flowers, and smiling stick figures. There were also framed photos on a small shelf, pictures of Daniel and Lily standing in front of the farm during happier seasons when the crops had grown tall and healthy. One photo caught Amelia's attention. It showed Daniel, Lily, and a woman standing together with their arms around each other. The woman had a gentle smile and kind eyes. Amelia guessed she must have been Lily's mother. Meanwhile, outside, Daniel walked toward the road where the black luxury car sat quietly beneath the darkening sky. He crouched beside the hood and opened it carefully. Even though the car was far more advanced than the trucks he usually worked on, Daniel understood enough about engines to inspect the basic components. He examined the wires, the fuel line, and the battery connection. After several minutes, he noticed a small crack in the fuel line that was preventing the engine from receiving fuel properly. "That explains it," he muttered to himself. The repair would take time. But he believed he could fix it using the tools he had at home. Back inside the farmhouse, Lily continued talking with Amelia. Children had a natural curiosity that made them fearless when asking questions adults often avoided. "Are you rich?" Lily suddenly asked, tilting her head innocently. Amelia nearly laughed at the direct question. Well, some people would say that, she admitted. Lily thought about that for a moment before asking another question. Does being rich make you happy? Amelia froze slightly. That question was much harder to answer. Her life was full of wealth, luxury, and success. She owned companies worth millions and traveled in private jets for business meetings. Yet many nights she returned to her large apartment, feeling tired and alone. Happiness wasn't something she often stopped to think about. She finally answered gently, "Sometimes it does, but not always." Lily nodded thoughtfully as if she understood something deeper than her years suggested. "Daddy says kindness is more important than money," she said proudly. Amelia looked at the little girl and felt those simple words touch her heart. In the world Amelia lived in, success was measured by profit, competition, and status. Rarely did people speak about kindness as if it were the most valuable thing a person could have. Outside, Daniel continued working carefully under the dim glow of a flashlight. The wind had grown colder as night approached, but he focused patiently on replacing the damaged section of the fuel line. His hands were rough from years of farming and mechanical work, but they moved with steady confidence. Nearly 30 minutes later, he tightened the final connection and wiped his hands with a cloth. "Let's see if that works," he said quietly before closing the hood. Inside the farmhouse, Amelia had finished the soup and was talking with Lily about school and farm life. For the first time in a long while, Amelia felt relaxed without thinking about business deals or financial decisions. The simplicity of the moment felt strangely refreshing. Then the door opened and Daniel stepped back inside. "Good news," he said with a friendly smile. "I believe your car should start now." Amelia stood up immediately, relief spreading across her face. "Really?" she asked. Daniel nodded calmly. "Yes, it was just a damaged fuel line. I managed to repair it." Amelia felt incredibly grateful. She had expected to spend the entire night stranded on the road. Yet, this stranger had solved the problem with nothing more than patience and kindness. As she prepared to leave, she reached into her purse, not realizing that the next few minutes would reveal something even more surprising about the farmer who had just helped her. Because Daniel Carter, despite his financial struggles, was about to show Amelia a lesson about generosity that she would never forget. Amelia stood near the wooden table for a moment, feeling a wave of relief wash over her after hearing that her car was finally repaired. The thought of being stranded alone on a dark countryside road had made her uneasy. But Daniel had solved the problem with calm patience, as if helping strangers was simply part of his daily routine. She looked at him with genuine gratitude, realizing how rare it was to meet someone who helped without expecting anything in return. Reaching into her elegant leather purse, Amelia Pola drew out several large bills and held them toward Daniel. "Please," she said sincerely, "you must accept this. You've helped me more than you know." The amount she offered was more than enough to pay a professional mechanic for several hours of work, and for a brief moment, Amelia assumed Daniel would gladly accept it. After all, it was obvious that life on the small farm was not easy. The furniture inside the house was old. The walls showed signs of wear and the land outside looked as though it had endured difficult seasons. But Daniel did something Amelia never expected. He gently raised his hand and shook his head. "No," he said quietly but firmly. Amelia blinked in surprise. "What do you mean, no?" she asked, almost thinking he hadn't understood. Daniel smiled kindly and pushed her hand back toward her purse. "Helping someone who needs it should never come with a price," he replied. Amelia felt completely stunned. In the business world she lived in, every service had a cost, every favor had a condition, and every agreement came with contracts and negotiations. Yet, here was a man who clearly worked hard just to provide for his daughter, refusing money that could have helped his family. "But you spent nearly an hour fixing my car," Amelia insisted. "At least let me pay you for your time." Daniel shook his head again, this time with a calm certainty that left no room for argument. "If you truly want to repay me," he said gently, "then promise that one day you'll help someone else who needs it." Those words settled into Amelia's heart with unexpected weight. She slowly lowered the money, realizing that Daniel's kindness was not something that could be bought. Lily, who had been quietly watching the conversation from the table, smiled proudly at her father. Daddy always helps P. Opal, she said happily. Amelia looked at the little girl and felt a warmth spread through her chest. You have a wonderful father, she said softly. Lily nodded enthusiastically. He says kindness is like planting seeds, she explained. If you plant enough of them, good things grow. Amelia couldn't help but smile at the wisdom in the child's words. Before leaving, she took one last look around the farmhouse. It was small and simple, but it was filled with something she rarely experienced in the expensive buildings of the city: genuine warmth and love. She walked toward the door and Daniel followed her outside. The night had grown darker and the sky was now filled with countless stars shining above the quiet fields. Amelia walked to her car and turned the key. The engine started smoothly. It works perfectly, she called out, leaning out the window. Daniel nodded with a satisfied smile. Drive safely, he said. Amelia paused for a moment before speaking again. Thank you, she said sincerely. Not just for fixing my car, but for everything. Daniel simply waved politely. As Amelia drove away down the quiet road, she glanced in her rearview mirror and saw the small farmhouse growing smaller in the distance. Yet the memory of that humble home remained clear in her mind. The warmth of the lantern light, the taste of homemade soup, Lily's cheerful smile, and Daniel's quiet generosity stayed with her during the entire drive back to the city. When Amelia finally returned to her luxurious apartment later that night, she found herself thinking about the farmer and his daughter again and again. The contrast between their lives was impossible to ignore. Amelia owned more wealth than she could ever spend, yet the simple farmhouse seemed richer in ways money could never measure. The next morning, while sitting in her large office overlooking the busy city streets, Amelia asked her assistant to gather information about the farmland in the area where her car had broken down. At first, the request seemed like nothing more than curiosity, but when the report arrived later that afternoon, Amelia was shocked by what she read. According to the records, Daniel Carter's farm had been struggling financially for several years. Poor harvests, rising equipment costs, and a large loan from the bank had placed the property in serious danger. If the debt was not paid soon, the bank planned to seize the farm within a few months. Amelia leaned back in her chair, staring at the document in disbelief. The man who had refused her money the night before, the man who had offered her food and warmth without hesitation, was about to lose the land that had been in his family for generations. She remembered Daniel's calm smile when he refused payment and the simple words he had said, "If you want to repay me, help someone else someday." Amelia slowly closed the report and looked out the window at the towering skyscrapers surrounding her office. In that moment, she made a decision that would soon change Daniel and Lily's future forever. Because sometimes, a single act of kindness can travel farther than anyone expects. And Amelia Hartley was about to return the kindness she had received in a way the poor farmer could never have imagined. Amelia sat quietly in her office, staring at the report that lay open on her desk. The words on the paper kept repeating in her mind, like an echo she couldn't ignore. Daniel Carter's farm, the same humble land where he worked tirelessly every day to raise his daughter, was on the verge of being taken by the bank. Years of poor harvests, rising equipment, antique costs, and a large loan had slowly pushed the farm into serious debt. If the balance was not paid within a few months, the property would be seized and sold. Amelia leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes for a moment. She remembered the warm lantern light inside the farmhouse, the smell of the homemade soup, Lily's innocent smile, and Daniel's calm voice when he refused the money she offered him. In the world Amelia came from, most people would have accepted that money without hesitation, especially if they were struggling financially. Yet, Daniel had not only refused it, but had asked her to simply help someone else someday. That memory made Amelia feel something deep inside her chest, something she hadn't felt in years, a strong desire to do something meaningful, something that was not connected to profit, business strategy, or personal gain. She picked up the report again and read through every detail carefully. The debt was large, but for someone with Amelia's resources, it was not impossible to solve. However, she didn't want to simply send money anonymously. Daniel's kindness deserved something more thoughtful than that. After thinking for several minutes, Amelia called her financial advisor and asked him to contact the bank that held the loan for Daniel's farm. The advisor was surprised by the unusual request, but Amelia was firm. Within a few hours, the arrangements were already beginning. By the end of the day, Amelia had quietly purchased the loan from the bank, ensuring that the farm would no longer face immediate foreclosure. But she wasn't finished. 2 days later, as the afternoon sun spread warm golden light across the countryside, a familiar black car slowly drove down the narrow road beside Daniel's fields. Daniel was standing near the fence, repairing a broken wooden post, when he noticed the car approaching. At first, he didn't recognize it, but when the vehicle stopped and Amelia stepped out, he looked genuinely surprised. "Miss Amelia," he said, wiping his hands on his work shirt. "I didn't expect to see you again." Amelia smiled warmly as she walked toward him. The wind gently moved through the tall grass surrounding the farm, creating a peaceful scene just like the evening when her car had broken down. "Hello, Daniel," she said kindly. "I hope I'm not interrupting your work." Daniel shook his head politely. "Not at all." "Is your car giving you trouble again?" he asked with a light laugh. Amelia chuckled softly. "No, thankfully it's running perfectly. I actually came to talk to you." Daniel looked slightly puzzled, but invited her toward the farmhouse. Lily, who was playing near the porch, immediately recognized Amelia and ran forward excitedly. "You came back," she shouted happily before giving Amelia a quick hug. Amelia laughed and hugged her gently. "Of course I did." Once they were all seated at the wooden table inside the house, Amelia took a moment before explaining the reason for her visit. Daniel noticed the serious expression on her face and sensed that something important was about to be said. "After I returned to the city," Amelia began calmly, "I couldn't stop thinking about the kindness you showed me that night." Daniel shrugged modestly. "Anyone would have helped." Amelia shook her head gently. "Not everyone would refuse money the way you did." She then placed a folder on the table and slowly slid it toward Daniel. "I also learned something about your farm." Daniel's expression immediately grew uneasy. "What do you mean?" he asked cautiously. Amelia opened the folder and showed him the documents. "I found out about the loan and the bank's plans to take the farm." Daniel lowered his eyes, clearly embarrassed that his struggles had been discovered. "Yes, things have been difficult these past few years," he admitted quietly. "But I'm doing everything I can to fix it." Amelia nodded understandingly before continuing. "That's why I came back." Daniel looked at her with confusion. Amelia took a deep breath and spoke gently. "I bought the loan from the bank." For a moment, the room fell completely silent. Daniel blinked as if he wasn't sure he had heard correctly. "You what?" he asked slowly. Amelia smiled kindly. "The bank no longer owns the loan." "I do." Daniel stared at the documents in disbelief, trying to understand what this meant. Amelia continued speaking before he could protest. "You once told me that if I wanted to repay your kindness, I should help someone else someday." "Well, I decided that someone should be you." Daniel's eyes filled with emotion as the realization finally reached him. The farm that had been in his family for generations, the land he feared losing, was suddenly safe. "I don't know what to say," he whispered, overwhelmed. Lily looked between the two adults with curiosity before asking the question on her mind. "Does this mean we can stay here?" Amelia smiled warmly at her. "Yes, Lily, your home is safe." The little girl's face lit up with happiness, and she ran to hug her father tightly. Daniel looked at Amelia with deep gratitude. "You didn't have to do this," he said softly. Amelia shook her head. "Maybe not, but sometimes kindness deserves to come back in a bigger way." That evening, as the sun slowly set behind the fields and painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Amelia stood outside the farmhouse looking across the peaceful farmland. She realized that the unexpected breakdown of her car had led her to something far more valuable than any business deal she had ever made. Daniel and Lily had reminded her of a truth she had nearly forgotten, that the richest people in the world are not always the ones with the most money, but the ones with the most generous hearts. And if this story touched your heart and reminded you of the power of kindness, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel Soul of Kindness. where every story proves that even the smallest act of kindness can change someone's life forever. Never,